everybody, I am so excited for our second workshop. We are here to talk about when is the right time to pursue a graduate degree. I mean, you are all professionals in your careers. You are all potentially thinking about it or are already in a graduate degree, or maybe you're considering pursuing an additional graduate degree if you've already got one. This is an extremely pertinent and relevant topic for anybody who's thought about more education. This workshop is for you. I'm really excited for you to experience our guest speaker this evening. It's going to be really insightful, very data-driven. It's going to have a lot of facts and figures that will hopefully help you make the most educated decision about what makes the most sense for you. By the way, my name is Garrett Mentee. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. And really, you've already started meeting with your mentor. That is awesome. Hopefully, you've already set up your first meeting. Maybe you've even already set up your second meeting. If that's the case, that's amazing news. But the focus for this workshop is how can you be intentional about really taking steps forward for yourself professionally. Now, I know that these workshops are on a wide array of topics. Obviously, our first workshop was on how to transition into a managerial role. This workshop's about determining whether or not it's worth it to pursue a graduate degree. But I really want to challenge you that when you're in your mentor meetings, that you are customizing it to your experience for what you want to accomplish with your own career. Because I recognize that some of these workshops are more relevant to you than others, and that's, by the way, completely okay. We bring in really amazing world-class guest speakers to come in and be our guests for these workshops, and that's fantastic. And the ideal goal is that all of them are relevant to you, but I recognize that it varies. And some workshops are going to be more relevant to some people than other people. But what I want you to recognize is that even in this workshop, even if you feel like it's not the most relevant to you, that there's a lot of nuggets. There's a lot of topics that we talk about with our guest speaker that I believe can apply to a lot of situations that you may face in your life. So I'm really excited to get started. Now, one thing that I really want to focus in on, and this is something we talked about last time in our workshop, and that is understanding your strategy, your story, and your state. Those are the three keys to being successful in this program. The most important one, that being state. So physically, where are you? What is going on in your world? Are you having a bad day? Are you having a stressful day? Are you having a difficult time with your significant other? Did your dog just die? I don't care what is going on with your world, no matter how stressful, no matter how mad, no matter how angry, no matter how bad anything is going on in your world, you can change your state in a matter of seconds because your emotions drive your emotions. So what I want you to do right now to get yourself ready for this workshop is I want you to stand up and I want you to shake it out. I want you to shimmy it loose. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just go, yeah! Just let it loose, let it out, let it go. Because what you're doing is you're letting blood flow to your brain. You're releasing endorphins in your brain. You're getting yourself into a state conducive for receiving information. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, when you sit down for too long, you have diminishing returns on your mental investment. Your likelihood of retaining that information is significantly minimized. So I want to challenge you to get up, shake it out, let it loose, get your blood flowing, because when your blood's flowing to your brain, your likelihood of actually remembering this information is significantly higher. Now, when you're going into your mentor relationship, when you're meeting with your mentor, if you can get your blood flowing before those mentor meetings, you're much more likely to retain the information your mentor has to say for you and to you. But if you don't get yourself into a state ready for this mentor relationship, your likelihood of making the most out of that experience diminishes. So I want you to get yourself into a state. Now, the next key is your story. What is the story you tell yourself? Why will you be successful? I'd love to know it. In fact, actually, if you could, post it in the comment section. Why are you going to be successful? I mean, if in your mind you think, hey, I'm cool with mediocre, I'm cool with just settling, this program is not for you. I can tell you that right now. If you're thinking to yourself, hey, I want to settle, I just want to kind of like not really aspire for too much, you wouldn't be in this mentor program. So what I'm here to tell you is shoot for the stars. Have big, crazy, hairy, audacious goals. And by the way, don't let anybody else judge you for your goal because your goals are your own. So what is audacious to you may not be audacious to somebody else, and what is audacious to somebody else may not be audacious to you, but that is okay. It's not for you to judge. It is for you to make strides for yourself, because at the end of the day, this program is about personal growth and confidence, helping you put yourself into the best position for you to succeed. So if you can tell yourself a story for why you will be marginally to exemplary, significantly better than where you're at the beginning of this program, that is awesome, and that is where I want you to go. That's where I want you to be. Now, the last part is your strategy. What is the strategy that you're going to do to start putting yourself in the best position to succeed? Now, this program, this workshop specifically, is about when is the right time to pursue a graduate degree. Now, one thing that I strongly encourage you to do, because here's the thing, at the end of the day, your strategies are all about routines. We think about routines both in the bad sense as well as the good sense. Bad routines are, things that we consider habits, bad habits, they're bad. But we typically have a negative connotation around habits just because of so many bad habits we've heard about. But there's a lot of things and a lot of beneficial things with good habits. So what are things that you can do on a daily, regular basis that helps you prepare for anything that you want to be better at? That is what I want to focus on. So one strategy that you can implement is implementing a SWOT analysis on a monthly basis of your life, of your career, of your higher education experience, of anything. Doing a SWOT analysis. SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. So if you're currently right now in a job and you're thinking to yourself, I'm contemplating a graduate degree, but I don't really know right now, what you'll want to think about is, what are the strengths of pursuing a graduate degree? What are the weaknesses of pursuing a graduate degree? What are the opportunities of staying in your current role? And what are the threats to leaving your current role for this graduate degree? If you can lay this out for yourself, it will help you on a substantial level towards making the most educated decision for yourself for why you should or should not pursue a graduate degree. Now, our guest speaker this evening is going to talk about the literal specific facts and figures of financially, when does it make sense for you to get a graduate degree, and when does it not make sense for you to get a graduate degree? And so I think you're going to really enjoy what our guest speaker has to say about this, because the insight is unbelievable. I think you're going to really enjoy it. But in terms of the strategies, I want you to do a SWOT analysis to help you prepare for that. The other thing is, I want you to start having more informational interviews beyond just your mentor. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what stage of life you are in. You can have conversations with people. Just because you're not a quote unquote current college student in a collegiate sense, you're still a student of life. You're still a student of professional outcomes. And by being willing to admit that you're still a student, you can take the knowledge of somebody else. You can say, hey, I'm a student. I'm interested in learning more about XYZ field. Would you be willing to have a coffee with me or a conversation with me? That is a great conversation starter for you to learn more about other fields, because at the end of the day, it's not about stagnating. It is about growing. It is about learning. It is about being uncomfortable and being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So those are the key points I really want you to take away from our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to jump into our guest speaker. By the way, if you've not connected with me on LinkedIn yet, please do so. We have a LinkedIn community, a Ambition in Motion group where all of us participate in it. We can post our questions. Our entire community can answer them or see them or relate to them. It's a really cool place to be. If you don't have a LinkedIn, absolutely get a LinkedIn. If you do have a LinkedIn and you have not connected with me, I strongly encourage it. I'm so excited to get started, and I'm so excited for you to experience our guest speaker this evening. Thanks for your time. I'm looking forward to get this guest interview going. Hey everybody, welcome to our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to dive into our topic for today. That is, when is the right time to pursue additional education? I mean, we're in this very interesting time period. We got COVID. We got a lot of things going on. People are shuffling careers. People are shuffling jobs. I would imagine that if you are in this circumstance right now and you're finding it difficult to get a role that's the right fit for you, you might think, okay, I need to go get additional education to bolster my credibility, and you might as well go through it during a time of economic instability. But then at the same time, for some industries, people are looking for anybody to fill any role. So this is a great time to advance it. Maybe you want to put on hold some of your additional educational pursuits. But sussing that out, figuring out what is the right path for you, when is the right time for you, is not the easiest decision in the world. Fortunately, we've got an incredible guest with us here this evening to help us weigh the pros and cons of when is the right time to pursue additional education. We've got Jenn Longbine with us. Jenn leads teams that bring inspiring talent to her company. Jenn believes that leading with inclusion and belonging is the key to unlocking diversity. She's currently the head of G&A recruiting for Slack. Jenn, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Happy to.
So I'd love to just get started off just real quick. Background on you. What has your career path and educational path been like up to this moment in time in your career?
Yeah, it's been a twisty road, and I think a lot of folks probably will be able to relate to that. My undergrad, I majored in music therapy, and so I had a very different plan for my life, early on. Fast forward 25 years later in big companies, I was working for Starbucks while I was doing my undergrad, and I used to call it my just until job. Like, I'm doing this just until my real life starts, and just until, because I didn't give a lot of credibility to the industry of like retail, customer service. Lo and behold, I fell in love with it. Me being customer and client facing is meant to be. So it was great. spent 10 years at Starbucks, 11 years with Apple. And when I was at Apple, I got deep imposter syndrome. I started to feel, I remember being in a boardroom and sitting with Steve Jobs and some super big wigs. And I was super in my head, and this is so silly thinking back, being very vulnerable here. But I remember sitting thinking, like, I wonder if these people know that I don't have a degree in this topic. Like, do they know? Can they tell? Very much in my head about it. And so
like that TikTok video, they're gonna know. They're totally gonna know. How are they gonna know? How would they possibly know?
And also no one cares, right? Like we're so narcissistic as humans, but I remember just sitting there thinking that, and I got home, and for probably the next 6 months, I told myself, and others would tell me, no one cares. It doesn't matter. No one cares. But I realized that me caring was enough of a reason to do something about it. And so I thought a lot about kind of how I felt about higher education in that moment. I'd always thought I was going to go and get my master's degree, but it just never was the right time. And so ultimately what triggered it was having questions that I didn't have the answers to. There was something I deeply wanted to learn more about. And so I found a program at Cornell that was specific to really the topic at hand, and spent a year and a half going through that program and accelerated.
What was the program called?
Super crazy. Strategic, oh my gosh, where's my thing? Advanced Strategic HR Management. Sorry.
What made you curious about that? Like, why did that interest you?
So at that time, I was in a pretty senior leadership role doing strategic HR management, but I had grown up in these companies that had taught me how to do it, and I was feeling like a hack. And part of it too was wondering what the next step in my career was going to be. And a lot of people were telling me, you should do this, but I didn't have a strong point of view because I felt that. So like, should I be a generalist? Should I go into employee? I don't really know. Let me find out more about it. And so I think I wanted to validate that I knew what I thought I knew. And I think I needed to learn more so that I could make strategic decisions myself as well. And ultimately I achieved those things through that process. I think the toughest part about it, though, looking back, was study habits and things. If you went from undergrad to grad school, you take with you great habits. If you wait years like I did, then those were some of the toughest parts, honestly. But I ate up the curriculum, and it was so fantastic. And I was so grateful to be there, which was also a very different feeling than my undergrad. I did my undergrad because I felt like I was supposed to. I went to Cornell because I was dying to know what they were going to say. It's a very different dynamic. So I went from there to.
Hold on a second. I want to ask a quick question. Time out. Yeah. So this is very fascinating, and I think this is very normal. I think a lot of the students that are watching this right now, or young professionals, young alumni that are watching this right now, are probably in a very similar boat where they're like, you know what? I got a degree because I thought that was the thing I was supposed to do. And now I've got a degree, but now I'm considering actually pursuing a master's degree, or maybe I'm in the middle of a master's program because I'm genuinely eating it up. I'm freaking loving this content and information. Yeah, I guess maybe if you are in a master's program right now, I'd love to learn. Just post in the comment section. Why are you? Like, did you do this for the job? Did you do it for money, accolades, or are you just genuinely fascinated about this topic? So Jen, I'd love to ask, did your company pay for you to get your master's degree?
They did. They paid for part of it. So it was a part of it. So it was a steeper bill than I had planned. I think part of the reason I applied to Cornell, they called my bluff by letting me in, I think, at the time. But yeah, it was partially paid for. And then I just completed another program. I think every 4 years or so, I get a little itchy now and want to go back to school. So I just finished a program that Slack also paid for a large portion of, which is great.
How do you broach that topic? Like, is it just like part of like the bylaws where you're like, hey, if you get into this extra program, we'll cover, was it like 75%, 50%? If it was a percentage, then I would kind of understand why you would want to go to the most expensive program possible, because they're going to cover 75% of 50,000 or 5,000. I might as well go for the 50,000 because they're going to cover more of that. I don't know. What was your logic in that? Or maybe I'm just being way too like economical about it, I guess.
I wish that was the case. They do a firm dollar amount, or did back then at least. I want to say it was like 5,225, some strange little number like that, they would give you. And all it requires is manager sign off. So your manager would have to sort of acknowledge that, yes, this topic is relevant to what we're paying her to do for a living. And so it ultimately is a good investment for the company as well. If I wanted to take underwater basket weaving or something totally different, they would not have paid for it. So, and then at Slack, it was a little bit different. Each employee, it wasn't so much about tuition reimbursement as it is professional and personal development. Each employee had like $2,000 a year. At that time, again, these things change so quickly, where for professional or personal development each year. So I put that towards my UCLA Anderson program.
You got this person who's got a PhD right now in underwater basket weaving, really frustrated, really frustrated. They're like, are you kidding me right now? Are you kidding me?
Relevance is everything. I'll tell you what, I remember being a store manager for Starbucks when I'm 21 years old. And I had all myriad of employees that were older than me that had 4-year college degrees that were working as baristas in my store, and with degrees like religious studies, women's studies, things that ultimately would only lead down an academic path. And if you weren't interested in building a career in academia, then what are you going to do? So a lot of these folks were really figuring out, oh, I have these huge student loans and there's not really a viable career path here for me. So
wait, can I time out that real quick? Because you could potentially argue that you were in a similar boat. Like you had a bachelor's degree in what, music theory?
Therapy.
Music therapy. I'm not necessarily like in the purview of all the degrees in the world, but like religious studies and music therapy, in my mind, kind of are in the same bucket of like, unless you wanted to go into academia, I don't necessarily see the clear path to, a certain professional path. How'd you bust through that?
I am a total ambitious creature, I think. And it was just out of the love for what I was doing and the people around me. I kept getting promoted. I was Starbucks' youngest employee ever. I was their first minor hire in the 90s, which was like my claim to fame for a while. Then I was their youngest shift supervisor, youngest store manager, all these things. All those records have been blown out of the water now. But at the time, it was fun to climb that ladder. It felt just as fulfilling as going to school had. When I finished my undergrad, I had been diagnosed with cancer. And so that took things for a turn. And I think I don't want to be one of those annoying survivors that says this, but ultimately it's been such a gift to have that happen in my formative years, because it completely removed my threshold for being willing to do things that I'm not excited about. And so when I was following my gut going, this is not logical, I don't want to build a career in retail, I was following my heart, but this is fun and I want to do what's next. And I remember getting offered that district manager position and being so shocked at how excited I was and how much I wanted to do it. So sometimes life happens while you're making other plans. And I think we have to listen to that sometimes. Sometimes that voice needs to be louder than the one of duty.
That's so powerful. I think that there's something seriously to that just like facing adversity early on has such a huge impact on decisions and just ambition in general, because you get to this point where like, you just don't care. Like, I don't give a hoot about what anybody thinks that I'm going to do. I'm just going to do it because who knows how long I'm going to be on this earth or what my next move is going to be. So shoot, if I like it, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it for anybody else. And I think that flies in the face of a lot of people's notions, because they're thinking to themselves, like, I want to have security. I want to have support. I want to diversify my knowledge and, be super prepared for any scenario going on. And I've shared this with the students, like even from like, and by the way, my scenario does not compare to having cancer, but being a drug dealer and getting arrested and having like 5 felony distribution charges and like looking at prison, like jail time, like that was like an eye opener for me, where I was like, whoa, like, okay, I have to make decisions for myself and not based on what other people do. And I think, I don't know, I guess I'd be curious to know, do you have any suggestions or advice for people to like try to put themselves in a scenario where they can just get slapped in the face by life and like almost have those like realization moments?
It's a trust fall, I feel like, but honestly, I feel like my whole career has been a trust fall, because it's easier now in my 40s to be able to say that, because looking back obviously is so clear, but I trust now that if something is, I call it the ooh, this is going to sound a little bit silly, but I wait for the ooh. Like you see something and you go, ooh, I want to do that. I wait for the ooh, and I trust it now. I trust that if I follow it, I'll be successful doing whatever makes me feel that way. And I think that's why I've built a career in human resources and recruiting. I really believe that everybody can have a job they feel that way about, and most people don't believe that. And I love to mess with that and help prove them wrong and, you know, attach the right people to the right places. It's really exciting for me. I don't know if that's answering your question.
Well, it makes me think of an ooh moment, because I'm thinking to myself like, ooh, this is interesting, because it's almost like there's a inverse correlation between traditional structured options where there's less, maybe what we might call ooh to it, because we know exactly what's going to happen. Like if I do this, I'm going to get this. And if I do that, I'm going to get this. It's like a very clear step stool to some place that may or may not interest us, but like it provides some semblance of stability and we know exactly where we're going. So we know we have that guaranteed knowledge, like a lot of clarity about exactly where it's going, that a lot of people end up choosing to pursue. But I love your notion of like the ooh moment, because you're like, if you feel like something's an ooh moment, that likely means that there isn't a very clear steps to a ladder to where you're going with it.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't be an ooh moment had the outcome been insanely clear.
There's that surprise element to the ooh, right? And sometimes it's ooh, I haven't thought of that, or there's the thing I've been looking for that I would know it when I see it, you know. Let's just say it is a bit of a trust fall, but I also think you have to think about how you want your life to look and how you want to feel. You know, that old adage of people will never remember what you say or do, but they will always remember how you made them feel. Life is like that in reverse as well too. If you follow some predetermined boring ladder, you're not going to have many memories from those years in your life. If you attach it to feeling and emotion and you follow the things that make you feel the way that you want to feel, it just changes things. I think you have a more fulfilling and more enriching life. It's also something that's tougher to do because you can't roadmap it. You can't be, you know, sitting in your undergrad and go, okay, cool. So here's the steps I'm going to take to have that happen. Right. I mean, I think everybody's individual path is, you know, constantly changing. And I think just listening to that in your gut is the most important piece of it.
But you can guarantee, well, there's not a but, and it's more of an and you can guarantee that thing that made you go, ooh, you're going to find out more about. You're going to guarantee learn more about something that you're genuinely interested in. Now, whether or not you use that professionally or not is up in the air, but you're going to learn information that you're genuinely curious about. But it does.
Cornell was the ooh, right? Like exactly what we were talking about when my undergrad it was really interesting, but it wasn't a match for who I really am. I'm too type A to be the therapist. I need the therapist. But I enjoyed every minute of it, but it just wasn't truly me. Then I get to, you know, build a career that is authentically who I really am. And I'm learning who I really am as I'm building this career, and then coming to that educational precipice and being like, ooh, that's exactly the question I need an answer to. And I think it's so much better to be still paying that student loan right now because it was something I really wanted to do and something that really helped me.
So I was just about, so let's go into like the practical economic component of all of this. Like, how do we determine the economic worthwhileness of pursuing additional education while still maintaining the ooh factor?
Yeah, I mean, it's about, is it for the right reasons? Because I think if you're going because you think you should, that may not take you where you want to go. I was just actually helping somebody in a career coaching conversation yesterday who is saying, you know what, I think I'm going to go get this degree because I want to have this job. And I'm like, well, in this particular case, that's not going to get you where you want to go because they're looking for years of experience. If you read it in a book, that's not, you know, you may apply for that job and know that if they just give me the chance, I know I can do this. But the problem is you're applying against people who've already done it, right? So that educational path may ultimately not take you where you want to go. So if you go to school because you're interested in the topic, you're going to open all kinds of doors. Let the topic lead. Don't let the thing that you want to do lead, if that makes sense. Like you almost have to follow the thing you're most curious about, because ultimately you're exactly right. It's the thing that you'll put the most time and energy into. and ultimately succeed at. And I think you get it. You know, people get confused about what's going to work. If I get this degree and then maybe I can do that. I mean, if you're trying to force it, it's probably not your thing anyway.
Well, and what's so interesting, even within what you're saying, is how much of a role ego plays into all of that. Because I got a perfect example. Like there was a gentleman that I was working with named Greg. He pursued a JD, like essentially a law degree, because he had like assumed or read somewhere that if you become a lawyer, like you're going to be the ultimate employable person and you're going to be making a bunch of money. And yeah, it didn't work out the way he wanted it to. And it like, he doesn't really use his JD at all with his work. And nor is he interested in any of the things that he studied to get his JD. So it was kind of one of those sad kind of like, wow, you spent a lot of money getting this, I think it's called Juris Doctorate. And I don't actually know what the technical term for JD is, but he get essentially his master's in being a lawyer, essentially, passed the bar, and then just doesn't end up doing anything with it. And that's so frustrating.
Well, put yourself in the shoes of any hiring manager, okay? Yeah. If there's a candidate that has their Juris Doctorate who is meh about it, and there's a candidate who has their Juris Doctorate who is excited about it, interested, engaging, sparkle in their eye, that person always gets the job. Every hiring manager is a human, which means on some level we are a narcissist. And so each of us wants to give the job to the person whose dream job it is, so that tonight we can go to bed and go, oh, I did it good. You're welcome, you know? And so if you can't be that candidate, don't come to play.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not going to come with your A game, you might as well not come. But that also leads to the whole ego point, because so often if we got into this additional degree path, we got into this MBA, or we got into this PhD, we got into this master's program because our logic is this is going to open up doors to land XYZ job. XYZ job is our ego talking. Anything below that is below our ego's expectation. But if we're genuinely curious in the subject, we are much more inclined to take any position around that topic because we're genuinely curious. Like I've got a colleague on my team who was completing his PhD in industrial organizational psychology when I first met him at Indiana University. And I said, hey, I'm studying in this area. I can't afford to pay you, but like, would you be interested in being an intern, like unpaid? And like, you could pour through the data and I could like help collaborate with you on like different research topics. But you know, what are your thoughts? Because he was genuinely curious in the subjects we were testing and assessing for. He was like, yeah, of course. Like his ego didn't get in the way of the fact that I called him an intern, even though he was way older than me and getting a PhD.
Ego's not fun. Ego does not give you the ooh. And I think I hear this cliche that's about to come out of my mouth, but it is not about the destination. It's about the journey. If your goal is the destination, you don't typically reach it if you're not interested in what it takes to get there. You know, like I know in the boomers told their children, right? Baby boomers told their children that you can be anything you want. And so this whole generation of people were born going, hey, how come I went to the school and I did the thing and I don't have everything I want? Because what they didn't say is you can have anything you want as long as you're willing to do the work to get there. And the willingness, the magical unlock to the willingness and the sort of energy that it takes to put into an ambition that it takes is the ooh.
I'd love to take a moment to ask the audience a question real quick. If you were to pursue additional education, or if you are pursuing additional education, why would you do it, or why are you doing it? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that. So what aspects of your degrees do you, so you didn't, we didn't really touch on your UCLA education. What did you study then? Why did you mentioned you get like an itch every 5 years to get more education. What is that? I mean, I know we've talked about the ooh, but like, what was it and what about the ooh drove that? Like how did that whole genesis, how did the decision-making process go? And if you also don't mind me asking, like, how long will it be before you pay off some of your student loan debt?
Good question. So I don't think I finished the chronological sort of career journey. I went to Apple, then I went to Nike, and Nike was amazing, built a great big organization, so much fun. Then the pandemic hit and everything changed. And so one of the big things that changed during the time of the pandemic, not as a result of, is the demand for social justice and racial equality. And how badass is that, right? So then I get to Slack and I'm thinking, Slack is amazing. We're about to be acquired by Salesforce, which that deal closed 3 weeks ago. So I came to Slack to help transition Slack into the big company life and just sort of be a part of that move. But the thing that kept being on my mind is this is a building job, right? Like, I get to build something. Am I actually equipped to do it? I have a couple questions I don't know the answers to. And that's what brought me to UCLA Anderson. The 2 questions I had were, how do we make sure that this conversation about racial equality that is so prevalent right now is not a fad? How do we build it into the bones of what we do from a strategic lens in HR? Because I wasn't seeing it and I wasn't hearing anybody talk about it. The other piece was, how do we emerge from the pandemic? So many companies that went from all in-person to all remote patted themselves on the back to like, we crushed it. And I'm just thinking, but that's not hard. To go from all of one thing to all of another thing is not hard. It's change management. It's not difficult. What'll be hard is when we become a truly, a truly divided workforce. Divided is not the right word, but when half of you are remote and half of us are in person, are you the floating head, in the conference room on the Zoom screen? And if so, how do you create that sense of belonging? How do you continue to build culture? How do you, have inclusion in a space that is physically, literally divided? So those were my big questions. So I found the closest match to those conversations at UCLA Anderson. So that was the prompt. I paid for UCLA right up front because it was just a one-term program. So it wasn't too bad. Slack helped me with that. The Cornell piece of it, I'm probably 2 years away from paying off. So not too bad.
How many years in total, has it taken you to pay, or in total will it take you to pay it off? Cornell.
Is that so bad? I have to look at the date. That was 2013. So 9 years.
Almost 10 years.
10 years when it's all said and done. Yeah.
Cool. That's good to know. It's not a bad thing. It's, it's good to know. I think for anybody in the audience that are contemplating it, it's, there's, you do have to pay for it, that's a component to all of it, but it's worth it if you still are genuinely driven by it.
Yeah. And I think, again, that's part of it. The compulsion to give them my money comes from the desire to have the answers to those questions.
Have you ever decided against getting additional education? So have you ever been posed with a scenario where somebody was like, hey, we've got this master's program, this PhD program, we got this certification, you should totally do it. And then you said, no. And if so, what made you choose no?
I mean, for 15 years, probably I said no. I felt like I should continue my education, but duty wasn't enough to get me to do it. And there were all these things that came up over the course of that, decade or so between Starbucks and when I did go to Cornell, that things would pop up that made sense, if that makes sense, where it'd be like, okay, here's a, HR master's. But I'd be like, well, it wasn't compelling me. And I think what I realized is the thing that was holding me back was that it wouldn't help propel my career. So what's in it for me? I'm not that curious about a giant general topic, and it's not something I need. I've been able to propel my career without it. And so I think that's for me when I sort of came to this belief, and I know that everyone's going to feel their own way about it, but I think that continuing education should be reserved until you have a question that you don't know the answer to, because that's ultimately what's going to lead you to the right educational path versus, doing something out of duty that may or may not actually be relevant to how you build your career.
That makes sense. I think that that makes a lot of sense. It's not just about the duty, but it's also the genuine curiosity and being able to leverage that. So you kind of touched on this earlier, and I'd love to come back to it. You'd mentioned that, you took a little bit of a gap between undergrad and then getting this master's program at Cornell. And then one of the things you had totally kind of forgotten or lost a little bit of sight of was study habits. I would be curious to know pros and cons of going to get an additional master's degree or PhD or an additional education right after undergrad versus waiting a little while, pros and cons of each.
I think pros and cons in terms of doing it right in a row. Again, you've got your rhythm, you are in the mode, you're likely to get good grades, you're likely to know when to show up and know when to take notes and know when to get a study group together. You've got this down. It'll be easier to do it right then. But the con is, will you have ultimately wasted your time? because if it all blurs together like that, again, if you weren't attached emotionally to the content or the topic, it's all going to blur together 10 years from now. So then what was it all for? Right? And you're still paying that loan for 20 more years. And you're thinking, but I went into a totally different field because I was never that into it. It showed me what I didn't want to do, which ultimately is also incredibly valuable. So I don't want to knock that part of it, but is it valuable enough to sort of use that, play that card right then? If you hold that card until you have something that you're curious enough about and wait, then there's this huge pro, because it can, literally help drive your career forward like it has for me. But the cons are, you're not a student anymore, and it's different, and I think two things change really quickly in terms of modality. Now you're taking digital lectures, and you have sometimes campus privileges and sometimes not. It was a lot of the it's not like such an old person, but a lot of the logistics kind of took effort. It was hard, and it took me probably 6 months, honestly, to get in the groove of it. I would sit at my computer and swear at it and be like, why do I think I can do this? I can't do this. Like, why did I sign up for this? It's so hard. But then, ultimately, on the other side of that, I think the win was when I did kind of get there and just finishing it, that sense of accomplishment. I've never been more proud of myself of just like seeing something through. So it just, again, like it's all about how hard you're willing to work for the things you really want.
I love the way that you put it. I'm a big fan of this book called Lean Startup. You don't have to read it if you're an entrepreneur. I think it's a good book for anybody, but it's almost like you take a lean startup approach to pursuing additional education. It's like, okay, cool. Like you're starting to pursue this type of industry. Now we need to suss it out. Like going straight into that MBA may not be the right move, because you may not want to get into a role that requires you to have an MBA. I mean, you might not. You never really know, or any other master's program for that matter. You might as well go out into the real world, test it out, see what you like, see what you don't like, and then come back with that genuine curiosity to know, okay, I genuinely want to learn more about this. Whereas if I go straight into this MBA, I've got no background or insight. Like I know, like where I went to business school, they offered like a 3-2 MBA where you did 3 years undergrad and then 2 years of an MBA, and then you came out with an MBA and an undergrad. Wow. And I mean, it's cool, but there's no real world experience that comes with it. And you're like in classes constantly, like throughout your 5 years. And so there's a lot. Oh yeah, jump in.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
I should say, I think that's the thing I see the most is that sort of sticker shock from someone coming out of an MBA program. Like, okay, I'm ready to have my job now. And the employer's being like, yeah, no, you're not. You don't have the experience. You read about it. That was great. You did a group project about it. Congratulations. You have a cool degree on your wall. Good for you. I need somebody with experience. And so how do you, sometimes that's the rude awakening, right? It's like, well, how do I get there? I got my master's, but I still have to start and work my way up. Depending on your industry, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's interesting now though, that I'd love to learn your thoughts on is just with COVID and everything going virtual. Well, what are your thoughts on virtual classes versus in person? I mean, my initial thoughts are, and this is my own personal prerogative, but I would only pursue a master's degree or an MBA or something like that. I would only pursue that for the network. Like I would want to be around other really smart, proactive people that are super ambitious and that I could connect with and meet and get to know and like feel like I know them really well. That would be like part of a huge benefit for me to get my MBA, not necessarily the content of the courses themselves. With us going more online, we kind of lose a little bit of that. And so I feel like that for me would diminish substantially the value of getting an MBA. But I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
It's pros and cons. Again, at Cornell, I did mostly virtual. I lived in Oregon at the time. And it took some doing to sort of get into the swing of things. Now I feel like I would honestly, as a true extrovert, I share that with you. I would probably rather do it online. I'd love to have campus privileges so I can get there and have that moment. Like maybe there's a beginning and an ending term, something, or you can come together. But ultimately, people do such a good job of finding that connection point anyway. They're sending you a DM in the chat of the Zoom going, hey, let's connect on LinkedIn after this. People that want to connect are still connecting. But I think the biggest benefit is that we're not bound to location anymore. So your educational goals, there's so many more options that you have to meet those goals when you're not tied to logistics around it. So I think that's a huge piece of the pro. I mean, I went to UCLA Anderson and I live in Austin, so that was cool. That was cool. Although it's funny, I was saying, like the movie Legally Blonde, I was saying, what next time I go to LA, I'm going to stand on campus so I can go here and have that moment. You miss some of the nostalgia pieces of it and campus life, obviously, but you can learn a lot.
I love to ask the audience one last question. What do you prefer, live or virtual classes? Post in the comment section. Jenn, this has been a great workshop. I feel like this is super insightful, very fascinating topic. I loved learning more about your story and just diving into the decision-making process and the ooh moments and how you determine what is the right move and what is the not right move and how to go about properly justifying and allocating resources, both mentally, emotionally, time-wise, and obviously financially to additional education. I loved learning your decision-making process and all that. Any final notes for our audience on just how to determine when the right time is to pursue additional education?
I would say, almost to contradict myself a little bit on the topic of putting things off. I think when you're younger, it's easy to think, I can do this later. But keeping in mind that as your stage of life changes, when I started Cornell, I have twin boys, they were toddlers at the time. That was part of the hard. Looking back, wouldn't it have been nice to do that 3 years earlier, when I was getting more sleep? So I think it's something to think about too, in terms of just, if you're sort of mapping out your plan, in life and just kind of thinking about obstacles that may prevent you from ultimately achieving your goal.
But even to your point, like, Parkinson's law, which just essentially says that when any resource is in a vacuum, you will fill it up. Like, you thought you were fully booked with twin toddlers, and then you were like, you know what, I'm going to throw on this master's program at Cornell, and you made it work. You made it work.
This is why the ooh is so important. It's like that relationship propaganda book. He's just not that into you. Ultimately the message is, if he wants to see you, he will, no matter what's going on. Yeah. And that's how I feel about, you're so much more successful, I think, ultimately in the things that you are willing to move other things aside to do.
So true. Awesome. Well, Jenn, this has been great. Everybody in the audience, thanks for being here. Jenn, thanks for being here. One last question. How can our audience connect with you? Are you okay with them connecting with you on LinkedIn? And is there any other format that you would recommend or suggest students connect with you?
LinkedIn is the best way to go these days. And I'm super responsive on there. Happy to chat with any and all folks. And thank you so much, Garrett, for the conversation. I loved it. Gave me the ooze.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, everybody.